Mrs. Mercer, this loan was taken out using your identity for $250,000. I stared at the bank manager, then at my husband sitting beside me, silent, pale, refusing to meet my eyes. We were supposed to be signing paperwork for a routine refinance review. Instead, I was looking at documents with my name, my signature, and a debt I had never agreed to. Dorian kept saying there had to be a mistake, but the manager wasn't even looking at me anymore. He was looking at him. Then the manager opened another file and froze. His expression changed so fast my stomach dropped. He slowly pulled out a photo attached to the application, lowered his voice and asked, "Sir, is there any reason your wife doesn't know about the Cedar Grove address?" I turned toward Dorian. That's when he whispered something that made the manager go completely white. Before we continue, please hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notification bell for updates. The manager immediately closed the file halfway and glanced toward the glass office door, like he suddenly didn't want anyone outside hearing us. "Mr. Vale," he said carefully, "I think we need to slow this conversation down." My chest tightened. Dorian finally looked at me, but only for a second. "Lilian, don't overreact. They're mixing paperwork from another account." Another account? The way he said it made my stomach twist harder. I'd been married to Dorian for 13 years. I knew the difference between his normal voice and the one he used when he was hiding something. Calm, controlled, too controlled. The bank manager slid the loan documents closer to me. Every page carried my information, my social security number, my employment records, even copies of my driver's license. And the signatures looked close enough to fool almost anyone. "Almost. That's not my handwriting," I whispered. The manager nodded slowly. "We noticed inconsistencies during a compliance review. That's why we requested this meeting." I looked at Dorian again, waiting for him to deny it, to get angry, to say somebody stole our information. Instead, he loosened his tie with shaking fingers. That terrified me more than anything, because Dorian always had an explanation. Always. A memory flashed through my mind, 3 months earlier, standing in our kitchen while he grabbed a stack of mail before I could look through it. "I already handled the bills," he'd said. At the time, I thought nothing of it. Now every strange moment from the last year started pressing against the inside of my skull at once. The missing statements, the password changes on our banking apps, the late-night phone calls he took outside. The manager reached for the photo again. Dorian's voice sharpened instantly. "Don't." It was the first genuinely emotional thing he'd said since we sat down. The manager ignored him. He turned the picture toward me slowly. I only caught part of it at first, a woman standing beside Dorian in front of a house I'd never seen before. Then I saw the 2 children, and the way one little girl was holding his hand. My mouth went dry. The manager swallowed hard before speaking. "Mrs. Mercer, according to this application, your husband listed that residence as his primary family address." Primary family address. The words didn't even sound real coming out of my mouth. I grabbed the photo from the desk before Dorian could stop me. My hands were shaking so badly, the glossy paper bent at the corners. The woman in the picture looked comfortable beside him, not surprised to be there, not temporary. Her arm rested against his back like she'd done it 1,000 times before. The kids looked around 8 or 9 years old. A family photo. Not an affair. Something much worse. "Who is she?" I asked. Dorian leaned back in his chair and rubbed both hands over his face. "Lilian, just let me explain this privately." Privately? After dragging me into a bank office to discover someone had stolen my identity. The manager quietly cleared his throat. "Mrs. Mercer has the right to understand the financial accounts tied to her name." I looked at the paperwork again. Cedar Grove, utility bills, insurance records, the same address repeated over and over. Then another memory hit me. 2 years earlier, Dorian had started traveling constantly for consulting contracts. Sometimes he'd disappear for entire weekends. Whenever I complained, he made me feel guilty for doubting him. "You know I'm doing this for us." I believed him. I had believed everything. My throat tightened painfully. How long have you known about this? I asked the manager. We discovered irregularities during an internal audit last week, he said carefully, but the account itself has existed for several years. Several years? Dorian finally looked at me directly. It isn't what you think. I laughed once, a short, broken sound. There are children in that picture. Before he could answer, the manager slowly slid another document across the desk. At the top, beside Dorian's name, one line was circled in red ink. Marital status, married Karine Vale. I stopped breathing. Karine Vale, I repeated. The room suddenly felt too small, too warm. My pulse hammered so hard I could hear it in my ears. Dorian reached for the paper, but I pulled it away first. This is fake, he said quickly. The bank entered it wrong. The manager didn't respond immediately. That silence told me more than his words could have. Then he opened another folder. Inside were copies of utility bills, insurance statements, property tax records, and school enrollment forms. Every single one listed Dorian at the Cedar Grove address. Some of them went back nearly 6 years. My stomach dropped lower with every page. You've been living there? I asked quietly. No, Dorian snapped too fast. I stayed there sometimes for work. The manager looked uncomfortable. Mr. Vale represented himself as financially responsible for both households during the loan approval process. Both households. The phrase hit me like ice water. I stared at Dorian, trying to force my brain to reject what was sitting right in front of me, but suddenly all the missing pieces started locking together. The holidays he claimed clients kept him away. The birthdays he couldn't reschedule meetings for, the hotel charges he always explained away. He hadn't been working. He'd been somewhere else. With them. The collateral used for this loan was your marital home, the manager continued carefully. If payments continue falling behind, foreclosure proceedings could begin. I turned so sharply toward Dorian my chair scraped the floor. You put our house on the line. His jaw tightened. I was trying to keep everything afloat. Everything. Not us. Everything. Then the manager hesitated before adding one more sentence. Mrs. Mercer, another woman, contacted the bank 3 days ago claiming Mr. Vale promised her ownership of the Cedar Grove property. The blood drained from Dorian's face. And for the first time since this meeting began, he looked afraid. Tell her the truth. The manager's voice was calm, but the tension in the office felt suffocating. Dorian stood up so abruptly his chair rolled backward into the wall. This meeting is over, he said. We're leaving. I stared at him in disbelief. You think I'm walking out of here with you? He opened his mouth but nothing came out. For a moment nobody moved. Then the manager slowly turned his monitor toward me. Mrs. Mercer, he said quietly, there's something else you need to see. A series of transfers filled the screen. Retirement withdrawals. My retirement account. I leaned forward, confused at first, until I recognized the amounts. 10,000. 15,000. 22,000. Over and over. The dates stretched across nearly 2 years. That's impossible, I whispered. I never approved those. The manager nodded grimly. The authorizations were submitted electronically using credentials tied to your account. I looked at Dorian's and instantly knew. Every time he insisted on handling our taxes, every time he offered to simplify our passwords, every time he took my phone to fix banking notifications, he hadn't been helping me. He'd been controlling access. My hands started shaking uncontrollably. You stole my retirement. Dorian's composure finally cracked. I was paying debts. You don't understand how bad things got. What debts? He dragged both hands through his hair and looked toward the floor. The house, school tuition, credit cards. Karine thought I was investing money into a new business. Karine. Hearing him say her name so casually made something inside me harden instantly. The manager folded his hands together carefully. Because fraudulent signatures may be involved, our legal department has already flagged the account for investigation. Dorian looked up sharply. Investigation? Yes, the manager replied. Potential identity fraud and financial forgery. For the first time all afternoon, Dorian looked genuinely cornered. I stared at him, barely recognizing the man sitting beside me. How long? I asked. He didn't answer. How long, Dorian? His voice dropped almost to a whisper. 9 years. The room went silent. 9 years. 9 years of lies, fake business trips, hidden bills, and stolen money. Then the manager opened one final document. The Cedar Grove property, he said carefully, was purchased using funds pulled from refinancing Mrs. Mercer's home 3 years ago. I slowly turned toward my husband. He couldn't even look at me anymore. Then he muttered the sentence that finally shattered whatever was left between us. I was going to tell you after I sold the house. I stared at him coldly. Which house? Both of them. Dorian's voice barely rose above a whisper. For a second, I honestly thought I had misheard him. Then he finally looked at me. Not like a husband caught in a misunderstanding. Like a man realizing the story he spent years controlling had completely collapsed. I couldn't keep up anymore, he said quietly. Everything got bigger than I planned. The manager stayed silent while Dorian talked, almost like he understood this confession needed to happen without interruption. It came out in pieces at first. He met Corinne 9 years earlier during one of his consulting jobs. He told her he was divorced, said his first marriage ended years ago. At first it was just an affair, but when she became pregnant, he rented a small apartment nearby and started splitting his time between 2 lives. 2 birthdays, 2 Christmases, 2 women calling him when he was working late. Over time, the lies multiplied faster than he could manage. Corinne believed he was building a future for their children. I believed we were saving for retirement together. In reality, he was draining both households dry trying to maintain the illusion. The loan was supposed to fix everything, he said. I just needed time. I almost laughed at how absurd that sounded. $250,000 stolen in my name. My retirement account emptied. My house leveraged behind my back. And somehow he still talked like this was a temporary financial setback, instead of the destruction of 2 families. The manager finally spoke again. Mrs. Mercer, I strongly recommend contacting an attorney and filing a fraud report immediately. I nodded slowly, unable to take my eyes off Dorian. What did you tell her about me? I asked. His silence answered before he did. That I was your ex-wife, he admitted quietly. Something inside me went completely numb. Not rage. Not heartbreak. Something colder. Because suddenly every memory I had of our marriage felt contaminated. Every anniversary dinner, every apology for missed holidays, every time he kissed my forehead before leaving for another fake business trip. None of it had been real. I stood up carefully, gripping the edge of the desk to steady myself. Dorian rose too. Lilian, please. No. That single word stopped him completely. Outside the office, I could already see employees pretending not to stare. News traveled fast in places like banks, especially when fraud investigators started getting involved. And they were involved now. Within a week, I froze every shared account we had. I filed a police report. My attorney started emergency divorce proceedings and formally challenged the forged loan documents. Then Corinne learned the truth. Not from Dorian. From investigators. According to the bank, she broke down the same way I had. She believed every lie he told her. The Cedar Grove house she thought belonged to their family was tied to debt, fraud investigations, and legal claims she never knew existed. Dorian lost everything almost at once. His consulting firm suspended him after learning about the investigation. Multiple accounts were frozen. Detectives requested financial records tied to forged signatures and identity fraud. Friends and relatives started calling me non-stop after the story spread through our families. Some admitted they'd noticed strange inconsistencies over the years, holidays he missed, stories that didn't line up, but nobody imagined he was living a double life. Months later, forensic analysts confirmed the signatures on the loan documents were forged. The bank removed major portions of liability from my name, while the criminal investigation continued. I kept my home after restructuring the remaining debt legally through my attorney. The day I finished clearing Dorian's things out of the house, I found an old family photo buried in the back of a closet. Just the two of us, smiling at a camera, pretending. I stared at it for a long moment before turning it face down and dropping it into the box. Because the truth was, the man I married didn't disappear that day inside the bank. He was never real to begin with.